On the day his family threw him out like he was nothing, he didn't argue. He didn't beg. He didn't even look back. But what they didn't know was that the man they just abandoned wasn't who they thought he was. And by the time the truth came out, it was already too late to fix what they had destroyed. The room was full of laughter, but none of it was for him. Thomas Sterling stood quietly near the doorway, one hand resting on the back of a chair that didn't belong to him. 65 years old, gray hair, worn jacket, the kind of man people look past without even realizing it. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. His son's promotion, a new house, a new life, just not one that included him. "Dad, you can sit over there." Brandon didn't even look at him when he said it, just pointed toward a small chair in the corner, half hidden behind a decorative plant. Not at the table, not with the family. In the corner, like furniture. Thomas nodded. No argument, no reaction. He walked over and sat down. From across the room, he watched them, his son laughing with guests in expensive suits, his daughter-in-law pouring wine like she had done it her whole life, his ex-wife, Diane, smiling that same polished smile he remembered, except now, it wasn't for him. It hadn't been for a long time. Can you believe he still dresses like that? The whisper wasn't meant for him, but he heard it anyway. A soft laugh followed. Honestly, Brandon should have told him not to come. Thomas didn't move, didn't look up, didn't react, but his fingers tightened, just slightly, around the edge of the chair. Dinner was served. Plates clinked, glasses raised. "To new beginnings," Brandon said, lifting his wine. Everyone cheered. Thomas lifted his glass too. Water. No one noticed. Halfway through dinner, it happened. The moment. The one that changes everything, quietly, before it breaks loudly. A guest, some man in a tailored suit, leaned over to Brandon and asked casually, "So what does your father do?" There was a pause. Small, barely noticeable, but Thomas felt it. He looked up. For the first time that night, their eyes met. Just for a second. And in that second, Thomas saw it. Hesitation. Embarrassment. Calculation. Then Brandon smiled. "Oh, him," he said lightly. "He's just retired. Nothing special." A few polite nods. Conversation moved on. Just like that. But something didn't move on. Something shifted. Thomas slowly placed his glass down. Carefully. Quietly. Like a man making sure nothing spills before he stands up. He looked around the room one last time. At the house. At the table. At the people who shared his name, but not his respect. Then Diane spoke. Loud enough this time. "You know, Thomas, maybe it's time you think about moving somewhere smaller." The room went quiet. Not fully silent. Just enough. Enough for everyone to hear. "You've been holding on to things that don't really fit your life anymore." Her eyes drifted around the house. Then back to him. A message wrapped in politeness. "You don't belong here." Brandon sighed. "Mom's right," he added. No hesitation this time. "We're building something new here, Dad. A different lifestyle. Different circle." He gestured around the room. "You wouldn't be comfortable." A pause. Then the final cut. "And honestly, it's probably better if you just step back." Step back. Not leave. Not go. Just disappear quietly. Thomas stood up. Slowly. No anger. No shaking hands. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that makes people uncomfortable, even if they don't know why. Someone cleared their throat. Someone looked away. No one stopped him. He walked toward the door. Each step steady. Measured. Like a man who had already made his decision long before tonight. His hand reached for the handle. Then stopped. Just for a second. Behind him, laughter slowly returned. Glasses clinked again. Life continued. Without him, Thomas opened the door. Cold air rushed in. He stepped outside and closed it behind him. No one followed. And as he stood there, alone in the dark, he whispered something no one inside would ever hear. "Good." A pause. Then, "Now I can finally stop pretending." The door had barely closed behind him. And inside, the laughter came back. Louder this time. Freer. Like something heavy had finally been removed. "Finally," Diane muttered, adjusting her glass. I didn't want to say it before, but he was bringing the whole mood down. A few guests nodded. One of them smirked. Yeah, he didn't really fit the image. Brandon exhaled slowly, loosening his tie. "I've been dealing with that my whole life," he said. "You have no idea how hard it is, trying to build something serious, while dragging that behind you. Behind you. Not with you. Not for you. Behind you." Across the table, someone asked carefully, So what did he actually do before retiring? Brandon shrugged. Construction, electrical stuff, blue-collar work. A pause, then a quiet, dismissive laugh. Nothing wrong with it. Of course, just not exactly the kind of background you bring into rooms like this. More nods, more agreement, more illusion. But what none of them noticed was the envelope sitting on the hallway table, half hidden under a stack of unopened mail. Plain, unmarked, heavy. It had been there all evening, and no one touched it. Back outside, the cold air hit Thomas like a wave. But he didn't shiver, didn't rush. He just stood there, looking at the house. Lights glowing through the windows, shadows moving, laughter echoing faintly. A life he built, a life that had just erased him. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket. Not for warmth, for something else. A phone. Old. Scratched. Not impressive. But when he turned it on, the screen lit up instantly. No hesitation. No delay. 3 missed calls. Same number. No name saved. Thomas stared at it for a moment. Then, press call back. It rang once. Twice. Then, Mr. Sterling. A calm voice answered immediately. Not casual. Not familiar. Professional. Precise. We've been trying to reach you. Thomas said nothing at first. His eyes stayed on the house. On the window where his son stood, laughing with people who didn't know anything about him. It's handled, Thomas said finally. Simple. Controlled. Like he wasn't asking. Like he was confirming. A pause on the other end. Then, understood. We were waiting for your confirmation. Inside the house, a glass shattered. Someone laughed it off. Too much wine, they joked. Outside, Thomas ended the call. No explanation. No emotion. Just action. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, then walked toward the street. Not slowly this time. Not hesitating. Because for the first time that night, he wasn't the man they thought he was. Back inside, Diane walked past the hallway table. She paused. Just for a second. Her eyes caught the envelope. She frowned. Picked it up. Turned it over. No name. No stamp. Brandon, she called out. Did you see this? He glanced over, annoyed. What is it? I don't know. It was here earlier. He walked over, took the envelope, and opened it casually. Still distracted. Still confident. Still in control. Then he stopped. His expression changed. Just slightly. But enough. What? Diane asked. Brandon didn't answer. He just stared at the paper inside. Reading. Once. Twice. His grip tightened. Who brought this? He asked quietly. No one responded. Because no one knew. And that's when, for the first time that night, the illusion cracked. The paper trembled. Just slightly, in Brandon's hand. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But enough. What is it? Diane asked again, her voice sharper now. Brandon didn't answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the document, scanning, trying to understand what he was looking at. Numbers. Names. Signatures. And one thing that didn't make sense. At all. This isn't right, he muttered. Across the room, the guests had gone quiet. The energy had shifted. Something invisible had entered the room. Brandon. Diane stepped closer. What does it say? He hesitated. For the first time that night, he didn't look confident. Didn't look in control. It's legal paperwork, he said slowly. A transfer notice, asset ownership. He swallowed. Signed this morning. By who? Someone asked. Brandon didn't respond. Not right away. Because the answer didn't fit the version of reality he had been living in. Outside, Thomas walked down the empty street. No rush. No destination. Just movement. The night was quiet. But his mind wasn't. Because this wasn't the first time he had walked away. Just the first time he didn't plan on coming back. Years ago, he had stood in a very different room. Same silence. Same feeling. But back then he stayed. A younger Brandon. Angry. Frustrated. Why can't you be like other dads? He had shouted. Why do you always have to make things harder? Thomas had stood there, listening. Not defending. Not explaining. Because explaining would have changed everything. You don't understand, Thomas had said quietly. I don't want to understand. Brandon snapped. I just want a normal life. Normal. That word stayed with him. For years. So Thomas made a decision that night. A simple one. A painful one. If being normal meant disappearing, then that's what he would become. Back in the present. A car passed Thomas slowly, headlights sweeping across his face. For a split second, it revealed something different. Not weakness. Not defeat. Control. The kind of control that doesn't come from power, but from knowing something no one else does. Inside the house, Diane grabbed the paper from Brandon's hand. Impatient, frustrated, she scanned it quickly, then again, slower this time. Her expression shifted. "What is this?" she whispered. Brandon ran a hand through his hair. This says the property ownership structure has been changed." "What property?" she snapped. He looked at her, and for the first time, there was doubt in his voice. "This house." Silence. "That's not possible," Diane said immediately. "It's in your name." Brandon shook his head slowly. "No, it's not." A beat. It never was. The room went completely still. Across the table, one of the guests leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Brandon didn't answer him, because he was still trying to process it himself. The signature at the bottom of the document. The name. Clear. Undeniable. Thomas Sterling. Outside, Thomas stopped walking. Just for a second. He looked up at the sky. Dark. Quiet. Unbothered. "They wanted normal," he murmured. A faint, almost invisible smile crossed his face. "So I gave them the illusion of it." Inside, Diane's voice broke the silence. No, this is some kind of mistake." Brandon didn't argue, didn't reassure her, because deep down, something was starting to click. Every bill that had just been handled, every decision that had already been taken care of, every time his father had said nothing, and things still worked out. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was him, and they had just thrown him out. The silence didn't last long. It shattered. "This is ridiculous." Diane threw the paper onto the table like it had insulted her. "There's no way he owns this house. We've been living here for years." Brandon didn't argue, didn't defend, didn't even look at her, because something deep inside him was starting to feel very wrong. "Call the lawyer," Diane snapped. "Right now." Brandon hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Dialed. It rang. Once. Twice. "Hello," the lawyer answered. "Yeah, it's Brandon," he said quickly. "We just received some documents about the property. There's been some kind of mistake." A pause. Then the lawyer's voice changed. Not confused. Not surprised. Careful. "There's no mistake," he said. Brandon froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean," the lawyer continued, "the ownership structure was always under a holding arrangement." "A what?" "A legal entity," the lawyer explained. "Your father was the controlling party." The room felt smaller. "That's not possible," Brandon said, his voice tightening. "We've been paying for everything." Another pause. Longer this time. "No," the lawyer replied quietly. "You haven't." Brandon's grip on the phone tightened. All major payments, mortgage, taxes, maintenance, were covered through that entity. Diane shook her head violently. "No, that's not true. I would have known." The lawyer didn't respond immediately. Then, "With respect, you were never listed as the owner." Click. The call ended. No one spoke. Because now, it wasn't confusion anymore. It was realization. Back outside, Thomas stepped into a small, quiet cafe on the corner. Warm light. Soft music. No one looked at him twice. He walked to the counter. "Black coffee," he said. The barista nodded. Simple. Normal. Just the way they thought he was. But when he sat down, he pulled out his phone again. This time, he didn't wait. "Proceed," he said. No explanation. No hesitation. Just one word. On the other end. "Understood." Back in the house, Brandon's phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. 3 notifications. Back to back. He opened the first one. Account alert. Access restricted. His stomach dropped. "What is it?" Diane demanded. He didn't answer. Opened the second. Transaction failed. The third. Contact your financial institution. "No," he whispered. He tried again. Logging in. Refreshing. Retrying. Nothing. "It's not working," he said. Diane grabbed her own phone. Tapped rapidly. Her face went pale. "My card," she whispered. "It's declined." A guest stood up. "This isn't funny." Another checked his phone. Then another. Confusion spread across the room like smoke. Because suddenly, things weren't working. Payments. Access. Control. All the invisible systems that made their life effortless were breaking. One by one. Brandon looked around the room. At the expensive furniture. The wine. The people. All of it still there. But something had changed. None of it felt secure anymore. "Fix this," Diane snapped at him. "You need to fix this right now." Brandon stared at his phone. At the error messages. At the silence from people who used to respond instantly. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know how. Across town, Thomas took a slow sip of his coffee. Calm. Steady. Not angry. Not rushed. Just finished pretending. They wanted control, he murmured quietly. A small pause. So I showed them who had it. Back in the house. The lights flickered. Just once. Then again. And in that brief moment of darkness, no one spoke. Because deep down, they all felt it. This wasn't a mistake. This was a shift. And it had already begun. The illusion didn't just crack. It collapsed. Back in the house, no one was talking anymore. Not because they didn't want to, but because no one knew what to say. Brandon stood frozen in the middle of the room. Phone still in his hand. Screen still glowing with errors he couldn't fix. This doesn't make sense, he said under his breath. But deep down, it was starting to. Because the signs had always been there. He just never looked. Across the room, Diane paced back and forth. No, this is insane, she muttered. He couldn't have done this. He doesn't even understand how any of this works. That sentence hung in the air, because it was the lie they had believed for years. Back in the cafe, Thomas reached into his jacket again. But this time, he didn't pull out his phone. He pulled out a small leather folder. Worn. Simple. Nothing flashy. He placed it on the table. Opened it. Inside. Documents. Old. Precise. Organized. The kind of documents that don't belong to just a retired man. Back in the house, Brandon suddenly moved. Fast. He grabbed his keys. I'm going to see him, he said. Diane turned sharply. For what? Brandon didn't answer. Because for the first time, he wasn't trying to control the situation. He was trying to understand it. Cut to. The cafe door opened. A bell rang softly. Thomas didn't look up immediately. He already knew. Footsteps approached. Quick. Uneven. Dad. The word landed differently this time. Not confident. Not casual. Uncertain. Thomas lifted his eyes slowly. Met his son's gaze. For a moment, no one spoke. Because everything that needed to be said was already there. Brandon sat down. Too fast. Too tense. What is going on? He demanded. Thomas didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned the folder and slid it across the table. Read. Brandon hesitated. Then opened it. The first page. A company registration. Not new. Old. Decades old. He frowned. What is this? Thomas leaned back slightly. Calm. Keep going. Second page. Financial statements. Numbers that didn't match anything Brandon knew. Third page. Property records. Addresses. Multiple. Including the house. Brandon's breathing changed. What is this? He asked again. But this time, his voice was quieter. Because he already knew. He wasn't going to like the answer. Thomas folded his hands. Looked at him directly. For 30 years, he said, I built everything you've been living in. A beat. Not as your father. Another beat. As the man behind it. Silence. Brandon blinked. Trying to process. That doesn't make sense, he said. You were working construction. Thomas nodded. I was. A pause. And investing. Another pause. And owning. The words hit differently. Because suddenly, every missing piece started connecting. All those years, Brandon whispered. Thomas didn't interrupt. I stayed out of sight, he continued calmly. I let you think it was simple. Why? Brandon asked, almost desperate now. Thomas looked at him. Really looked at him. Because you didn't want the truth, he said. A beat. You wanted normal. That word again. It hit harder this time. Back in the house. Diane's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered immediately. Yes. A calm voice spoke. Mrs. Sterling, this is regarding the asset restructuring. Her stomach dropped. What restructuring? A pause. All holdings previously under the Sterling Group. She froze. Have been reassigned. To their original owner. Click. Back at the cafe, Brandon stared at the documents. Hands shaking now. You're telling me, he said slowly. Everything we have. Thomas cut him off. Had. Silence. Everything you had, he corrected calmly, was never yours. The words landed like a hammer. Brandon leaned back. Eyes wide. Who are you? He whispered. Thomas didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Didn't raise his voice. He just answered. I'm the man you asked to step back. A pause. So I did. The truth didn't explode. It sank in. Slowly. Painfully. Brandon didn't say anything after that. He couldn't. Because there was nothing left to argue. Everything he believed in, everything he stood on, was gone. Across the table, Thomas didn't move. Didn't rush. Didn't push. Because this part wasn't his to control anymore. It was life's. Cut to the house. It didn't look the same anymore. Not because anything had changed physically, but because now, they knew. Diane stood in the living room, surrounded by things she used to love. The furniture, the paintings, the polished surfaces, all of it still there. But none of it felt like hers. Her phone rang again. Another number. Another voice. Cold. Professional. Mrs. Sterling, this is a final notice. You'll need to vacate the property within 72 hours. Her hand trembled. This is my house, she snapped. A pause. No, ma'am, the voice replied. It isn't. Click. Silence. The kind of silence that screams. She turned slowly, looking around the room again. But this time, she didn't see a home. She saw a lie. Cut back to cafe. Brandon was still sitting there, staring at the papers. Not reading anymore. Just staring. My accounts, he said quietly. They're locked. Thomas nodded once. Temporary, he said. Brandon looked up. Hope flickered. Then, until everything is sorted. Hope died just as fast. What am I supposed to do? Brandon asked. And for the first time, there was no arrogance. No pride. No image. Just a question. A real one. Thomas leaned forward slightly. Work, he said. The word landed heavier than anything else. Brandon blinked. I can't just. You can. Thomas interrupted calmly. A pause. You just don't know how. Silence again. Because that was the truth Brandon had been avoiding his entire life. Cut to. The next morning. Rain. Cold. Relentless. Brandon stood outside the house. A suitcase beside him. The same door he once walked through like he owned the world. Now closed. Locked. Diane stood next to him. Shaking. Not from the cold. From something deeper. I don't understand, she whispered. How did we lose everything so fast? Brandon didn't answer. Because he knew. They didn't lose it fast. They never had it to begin with. A car passed by, splashing water onto the curb. No one stopped. No one looked. Because now, they were invisible. Just like the man they had thrown away. Brandon pulled out his phone. Scrolled through contacts. Names that used to matter. Investors. Friends. People who smiled at him. He called one. It rang. Then, voicemail. He tried another. Declined. Another. Blocked. His hand slowly lowered. Because the realization hit him all at once. They weren't his friends. They were his reflection. And now that the image was gone, so were they. Across town, Thomas walked into a small hardware store. The bell rang softly. The owner looked up. Smiled. Morning, Tom. Simple. Real. Thomas nodded. Morning. No judgment. No expectation. Just recognition. Back on the street. Brandon sat down on his suitcase. Rain soaking through his clothes. He didn't try to move anymore. Didn't try to fix anything. Because for the first time in his life, he had nothing to stand on. And nowhere to run. He looked down at his hands. Soft. Clean. Useless. Then, slowly, he whispered, I don't know how to start. Cut to. Cafe. Empty table. Thomas's coffee cup sat there. Half full. Still warm. But he was gone. The rain hadn't stopped. It came down harder now. Like the world itself was washing something away. Brandon didn't know how long he had been sitting there. Minutes. Hours. It didn't matter. Because time felt different when you had nothing left. Then, headlights cut through the rain. A truck slowed, then stopped. Brandon didn't look up immediately. He didn't expect anything anymore. The engine turned off. A door opened. Closed. Footsteps. Familiar. He looked up. Thomas. Standing a few feet away. Not rushing. Not angry. Just there. For a moment. Neither of them spoke. Because this time, there was nothing left to hide behind. Diane stepped forward suddenly, grabbing onto the moment like it was her last chance. Thomas, thank God, she said, her voice breaking. You have to fix this. This has gone too far. Thomas looked at her. Calm. Unmoved. No, he said simply. The word hit harder than shouting ever could. This is your fault, she snapped, desperation turning sharp. You did this. You took everything from us. Thomas didn't raise his voice. I took back what was mine, he replied. A pause. What you lost was never yours to begin with. Diane froze. Because deep down, she knew it was true. But truth doesn't feel fair when you're losing. She stepped closer, lowered her voice, changed tactics. We're family, she said. You can't just abandon us like this. Thomas's eyes shifted. Slowly. To family, he repeated. A beat. I was family yesterday. Silence. Because there was no answer to that. Brandon stood up. Slowly. He didn't step forward. Didn't try to hug him. Didn't pretend. Because something inside him had finally broken the right way. Dad. The word came out different this time. Heavy. Real. I messed up. No excuses. No explanation. Just truth. Thomas watched him. Carefully. I thought. Brandon continued, voice shaking. I thought I understood how the world worked. A bitter breath. But I didn't understand anything. He looked down at his hands again. I don't even know how to start. The same words. But this time, they meant something. The rain fell harder. Thomas stepped closer. Just one step. Close enough to see his son clearly. Not the suit. Not the image. The person. You want to start? Thomas said quietly. Brandon nodded. Thomas pointed to the street. There. Brandon frowned. Confused. That's where everyone starts, Thomas said. A pause. With nothing. Silence. Diane shook her head. This is insane, she whispered. You're really going to leave him like this? Thomas turned to her. No, he said. A beat. I'm finally meeting him where he actually is. Brandon swallowed hard. So that's it, he asked. No anger. No expectation. Just acceptance. Thomas looked at him for a long moment. Then, reached into his pocket. Pulled out something small. Not money. Not keys. A folded piece of paper. He handed it to Brandon. Brandon opened it slowly. An address. A name. A phone number. What is this? He asked. A job, Thomas said. A beat. Entry level. Another beat. They don't care who your father is. Silence. They care if you show up. Brandon stared at the paper. This wasn't a bailout. It was a beginning. Diane stepped forward again. What about me? She asked, almost pleading now. Thomas looked at her. And for the first time, there was something in his eyes. Not anger. Not love. Just distance. You made your choices, he said. A pause. Now you live with them. No drama. No shouting. Just truth. Thomas turned. Walked back toward his truck. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. This time, for real. Brandon stood there in the rain, holding the paper. Not saved. Not destroyed. Just reset. He looked up, watched his father drive away, then looked down again. At the address. At the first real step of his life. And slowly, he stood up. Not as the man he pretended to be, but as the one he had to become.